Tonight, before your head touches the pillow, you will choose whether tomorrow looks like yesterday or whether it finally breaks open into something new. Because the face you wash tonight carries the weight of every worry, every unpaid dream, every silent prayer you thought went unanswered. What if I told you that one simple act before bed can rinse away more than dust and sweat? That it can loosen the grip of old curses, quiet the voice of poverty, and invite wealth to recognize you at last? If this speaks to something deep inside you, stay with me, and let this become your nightly promise to yourself, because the life you want is listening to how you treat yourself in the quiet moments before sleep. Night rituals prepare the subconscious mind for renewal and release, because the mind does its deepest work when the body becomes still and the world grows quiet. During the day, consciousness is crowded with noise, pressure, reaction, and survival thinking, but as night approaches, those layers loosen and the subconscious begins to surface, carrying stored beliefs, emotional patterns, and unprocessed experiences. What you repeatedly do before sleep acts like an instruction set for that hidden layer of the mind, telling it what to keep, what to release, and what to rebuild while you rest. A ritual, even a simple one, signals safety and intention, and safety is what allows the subconscious to stop defending old habits and start reorganizing itself. When an action is done consistently at night, it bypasses logic and speaks directly to memory, identity, and expectation, shaping how the mind rehearses the future while the body sleeps. Renewal happens because repetition tells the brain that change is not a threat, but a rhythm, something familiar and allowed. Release happens because the mind finally gets permission to let go of emotional residue carried throughout the day, such as fear, resentment, shame, or scarcity thinking. The subconscious does not respond to force or argument. It responds to symbols, sensations, and patterns, and night rituals combine all three. The dim light, the slower breathing, the reduced stimulation, all open a doorway where intention sinks deeper instead of bouncing off surface resistance. Over time, this creates a subtle but powerful shift, where old internal narratives lose their emotional charge and new ones begin to feel natural. This is why people often wake up with different clarity after meaningful nighttime practices, not because anything dramatic happened externally, but because the internal environment was reset. The subconscious treats the moments before sleep as a bridge between today and tomorrow, and whatever is placed on that bridge is carried forward. When a ritual is done with awareness, it teaches the mind that rest is not escape but preparation, that sleep is not shutdown but recalibration, and that renewal does not require struggle, only consistency and presence, allowing change to unfold quietly beneath awareness while consciousness rests. Water symbolizes cleansing of emotional and spiritual residue because it speaks to the mind in a language older than words, a language rooted in sensation, memory, and instinct. Long before people could explain emotions or psychology, they understood water as the element that carries things away, dissolves what clings, and restores balance. The subconscious still responds to this symbolism instinctively, treating water as a signal of reset and renewal rather than a simple physical substance. Emotional residue builds quietly throughout the day through stress, comparison, disappointment, suppressed anger, and unspoken fear. And while the conscious mind may ignore these layers, the subconscious stores them in the body as tension, heaviness, and fatigue. When water touches the skin with intention, it creates a sensory interruption that tells the nervous system it is safe to release what it has been holding. This is why people often feel calmer near rivers, oceans, or rain, not because problems disappear, but because the body recognizes a familiar cue for letting go. Spiritually, water represents movement rather than stagnation, and stagnation is where emotional weight accumulates. Washing with awareness transforms a routine act into a boundary between what belongs to you and what you absorbed from the world. The mind does not need logic to accept this process. It responds to repetition and feeling. Each time water flows over the face, it mirrors the internal desire to be unburdened, to soften, to start again without carrying yesterday's tension into tomorrow. Over time, this association becomes conditioned, so the body begins releasing emotional buildup automatically when water is involved, even before conscious thought engages. This is not imagination, but pattern learning, where the brain links sensation with relief and relief with safety. Spiritual residue, such as inherited fear, limiting beliefs, or emotional imprints from others, is subtle but persistent, and water acts as a symbolic solvent, giving the mind permission to disengage from what no longer serves. The act becomes a quiet agreement between body and awareness that heaviness does not have to be permanent, that renewal can be gentle, and that release does not require struggle, only willingness and presence in the moment as the water flows and the mind follows the signal to loosen, soften, and empty itself of what it was never meant to carry. Intention transforms ordinary actions into powerful signals because the mind does not measure actions by their size, but by the meaning assigned to them. An action without intention is mechanical, performed by habit and processed only at the surface level of awareness. But when intention is present, the same action becomes a message sent inward, shaping identity, expectation, and behavior beneath consciousness. The subconscious is constantly scanning for signals that answer one question: what kind of person am I becoming? Intention answers that question repeatedly, quietly, and convincingly. When you attach intention to an action, you align thought, emotion, and movement into a single direction, and alignment is what gives an action weight. This is why two people can perform the same ritual and experience completely different outcomes, because one is simply going through motions while the other is communicating purpose. Intention acts like a spotlight, telling the mind what to prioritize and what to reinforce. Over time, the brain strengthens whatever pathways are repeatedly activated with emotion and focus, turning intentional actions into internal commands rather than temporary efforts. Ordinary actions happen every day: washing, walking, breathing, speaking, but intention converts them into symbols, and symbols are the language of the subconscious. The mind does not argue with symbols, it absorbs them. When intention is clear, the action becomes a signal of self-respect, readiness, and permission is essential for change. Many people remain stuck not because they lack effort, but because their actions contradict their deeper beliefs. Intention bridges that gap by slowly retraining belief through experience rather than force. Each intentional act becomes evidence that supports a new internal narrative, even when external results are not immediate. This builds coherence between who you say you want to be and how you move through small moments. Over time, the subconscious begins to expect outcomes that match the intention rather than old conditioning. This is how consistency reshapes identity without pressure. The power does not come from the action itself, but from the repeated signal it sends to the mind, teaching it what to accept, what to release, and what to prepare for, turning everyday behavior into a quiet architecture for lasting internal change. Releasing shame and fear is essential to ending cycles of lack, because these emotions quietly shape how a person sees opportunity, worth, and possibility long before any external circumstance comes into play. Shame teaches the mind that it must hide, shrink, or prove itself, while fear teaches it to anticipate loss even in moments of potential gain. Together, they form an internal environment where abundance feels unsafe or undeserved, causing the subconscious to sabotage progress without conscious awareness. A person may work hard, dream big, and speak positively, yet still carry an inner tension that whispers that success will be taken away, judged, or punished. The subconscious listens more closely to these whispers than to affirmations, because shame and fear are stored as emotional memories rather than ideas. These memories influence behavior subtly, shaping decisions, reactions, and expectations in ways that reinforce lack. Opportunities are overlooked, risks feel heavier than they are, and self-expression becomes restrained. Fear narrows perception, making the world seem limited, while shame convinces the individual that those limits are personal and permanent. This combination keeps the nervous system in a state of quiet defense where survival takes priority over expansion. Releasing these emotions is not about denying past pain, but about loosening its authority over the present. When shame is released, the mind stops measuring worth through struggle and begins allowing ease without guilt. When fear is released, attention shifts from what might go wrong to what might unfold. This shift changes how the brain evaluates choices, making room for curiosity instead of avoidance. Cycles of lack persist because the subconscious repeats what feels familiar, even when familiar means painful. Letting go of shame and fear interrupts that familiarity and introduces a new emotional baseline where abundance does not trigger alarm. Over time, the body relaxes, thoughts become less defensive, and actions align more naturally with growth rather than protection. This internal release creates space for new patterns to take root, not through force or urgency, but through a growing sense of safety that allows the mind to imagine, receive, and sustain more than it once believed possible. Self-respect is the foundation of attracting abundance because it shapes the standards you unconsciously accept and the boundaries you consistently enforce. The mind organizes life around what it believes is appropriate, and self-respect quietly defines that belief by determining what feels normal, tolerable, or out of reach. When self-respect is weak, the subconscious adapts to scarcity by normalizing overgiving, undervaluing time, and accepting less than what aligns with inner worth. This does not happen through deliberate choice, but through emotional conditioning, where the nervous system learns to associate struggle with safety and ease with risk. Abundance in any form requires the ability to receive without tension, and self-respect is what allows receiving to feel stable rather than threatening. It communicates to the mind that good things are not accidents or favors, but natural extensions of identity. Without self-respect, success can feel foreign, creating internal resistance that pushes it away. With self-respect, opportunity feels familiar even before evidence appears. This inner posture influences behavior in subtle ways, from how decisions are made to how energy is invested. People with self-respect are more likely to choose environments that support growth, to walk away from dynamics that drain them, and to maintain consistency without self-betrayal. These choices compound over time, shaping outcomes that reflect internal alignment rather than external pressure. Self-respect also changes how challenges are interpreted, turning obstacles into information rather than proof of unworthiness. This reframing preserves momentum and prevents emotional collapse during setbacks. Abundance responds to stability, not desperation, and self-respect provides that stability by anchoring identity in inherent value rather than constant validation. As self-respect deepens, the subconscious relaxes its grip on survival patterns, allowing creativity, focus, and confidence to surface more naturally. This creates a feedback loop where aligned action reinforces belief, and belief supports action without strain. Over time, abundance becomes less about pursuit and more about permission to take up space, to expect fairness, and to trust that effort can be met with return. In this way, self-respect becomes not just a mindset, but a quiet structure that shapes reality from the inside outward. Repetition builds belief, and belief reshapes destiny, because the mind accepts what it encounters consistently, not what it hears occasionally or wishes for intensely. Every repeated thought, action, or emotional response strengthens a neural pattern that the brain begins to treat as truth, regardless of whether it is empowering or limiting. The subconscious does not evaluate repetition for accuracy, it evaluates it for familiarity, and familiarity becomes comfort. Over time, comfort becomes identity. When a behavior or idea is repeated, the mind stops questioning it and starts organizing perception around it, filtering experiences in ways that confirm the established belief. This is how beliefs quietly direct attention, influence decisions, and shape expectations without conscious effort. Destiny, often perceived as external or fixed, is actually the long-term result of these accumulated internal patterns expressed through daily choices. When repetition reinforces a belief of limitation, the mind gravitates toward outcomes that match that belief, interpreting challenges as confirmation and ignoring possibilities that contradict it. When repetition reinforces belief in growth or worth, perception widens, and opportunity becomes more visible. This does not happen through force or dramatic change, but through gradual conditioning. Small, consistent actions send a stronger signal to the subconscious than rare bursts of motivation because they suggest stability rather than impulse. Stability is what the mind trusts. As belief solidifies, behavior aligns automatically, reducing inner conflict and hesitation. Decisions feel more intuitive, effort feels less strained, and resilience increases because actions are no longer in opposition to identity. Over time, these aligned behaviors accumulate, creating tangible results that appear as destiny from the outside. The power of repetition lies in its ability to bypass resistance and rewrite internal narratives quietly, without confrontation. Belief reshapes destiny not by predicting the future, but by preparing the mind to respond differently to the same circumstances. When the mind expects certain outcomes, it behaves in ways that make those outcomes more likely, completing the loop between belief and reality. This process continues whether one is aware of it or not, making repetition one of the most influential forces in shaping a life, not through grand moments, but through what is practiced until it feels normal and unquestioned. Stillness before sleep opens access to deeper awareness, because the mind, when finally quieted, can move beyond surface distractions and enter spaces where intuition, clarity, and insight reside. During the day, consciousness is fractured by responsibilities, sensory input, social demands, and constant mental chatter, which keeps awareness tethered to the immediate and the reactive. Stillness, especially in the moments before sleep, allows the nervous system to downshift, reducing the constant signaling of stress and urgency, and creating a calm field where subtler processes can operate. In this calm, the subconscious, which carries emotional patterns, memories, and deeply held beliefs, becomes more receptive, and awareness begins to notice connections that were previously overlooked. Thoughts that seemed scattered during the day organize themselves in the quiet. emotions that were buried under noise emerge with clarity. This is the fertile ground for self-reflection, problem-solving, and internal calibration, because the mind is not being pulled in multiple directions at once. The body, too, contributes to this process. Slower breathing, relaxed muscles, and lowered heart rate create a feedback loop that signals safety to the brain, encouraging the conscious mind to release tension and the subconscious to surface truths. Stillness before sleep also helps distinguish between old mental patterns and authentic insight by reducing the habitual reactions that often dominate waking consciousness. It creates a threshold where intention can meet the receptivity of the mind, making small rituals more powerful because they are performed in a state of heightened subtle awareness. Dreams, too, become more meaningful when entered from stillness, as they often reflect unresolved emotions or subconscious processing that can inform conscious choices. Over time, cultivating this quiet before sleep trains the mind to recognize and trust its deeper signals, enhancing intuition and decision-making. In essence, stillness is a bridge between the daily self and the deeper self, a threshold where awareness expands. The mind reorganizes and insight flows naturally, allowing clarity, healing, and preparation for growth to take root while the body rests and the world sleeps. Wealth begins as permission you give yourself, because before any external success or abundance can manifest, the mind must first accept that it is allowed, worthy, and capable of receiving it. Most people unconsciously carry limits, inherited or learned, that define wealth as rare, reserved for others, or contingent upon struggle, sacrifice, or external validation. These limits act as invisible gates, blocking opportunity and shaping perception so that even when circumstances appear favorable, the subconscious resists, interpreting ease or gain as dangerous or undeserved. Granting yourself permission is not merely thinking positively. It is an internal alignment where belief, emotion, and intention converge to remove internal barriers. It signals to the subconscious that you recognize value in yourself and that abundance is not a threat to identity, but a natural extension of it. This permission transforms how choices are made, how risks are assessed, and how energy is directed, because it establishes an internal expectation that wealth is possible and allowable. Without it, external efforts are diluted by hesitation, self-sabotage, or unconscious resistance, and opportunities that could have been embraced feel foreign or uncomfortable. With it, the mind begins to notice possibilities that were previously invisible, act decisively in moments that matter, and sustain persistence without conflict between desire and belief. Permission is also a form of respect for your own potential, acknowledging that your dreams are legitimate and that your life deserves expansion. Over time, this internal authorization becomes self-reinforcing. The more you allow yourself to step into opportunities, the more capable and confident you feel, which opens further avenues for growth. Wealth, therefore, is less about accumulation and more about the internal stance that welcomes it. By consciously granting yourself permission to receive abundance, you align your beliefs with action, your intentions with reality, and your identity with the possibilities that previously seemed distant. This simple yet profound shift in mindset often precedes material gain, because it lays the foundation for consistent, empowered choices that attract and sustain prosperity naturally.